Yeah, I come from men that stand. I'm in the field and you just sit in the stands. Take that bass out your voice. If you ain't got no gun in your hand, I do what I want. And you don't even do what you can, you do what you told. I got no love for my foes that can mimic my delivery and copy my prose. But what they can't comprehend is how I stick to this code. It's either in you or not. It's not the kicks and the clothes. They ain't cut from the same cloth, can't come from the same loom, fit in similar shapes or even sit in the same room. Confusing authenticity with part of the costume. I'm teaching gifted children, you can't come in this classroom.
Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Welcome back. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Geechee, Yusef, Dr. Yusef, Bunchy, Shakur, and Cherie. What's up? How y'all feeling?
Tired.
Tired.
Was working hard, trying not to get fired. So I don't die in capitalism.
I sound like your next play.
Working hard. Well, shit, if you don't, you keep your job and die, you still gonna die in capitalism. So,
yeah, it's like either way, you're screwed, I guess. But yeah, just trying to survive. I had a fun birthday, but yeah, I don't know.
No, I saw you flexing on Instagram and shit.
Yeah, I got a stunt on the host.
She said it's such ease, like she was ready.
Gotta remember. Gotta always remind these people.
What about you, Yusef? What you got going on? Since she's stunting on hoes, what you doing over
there? I'm chilling, man. I'm just still kind of reflecting on the time I was in New Orleans for the revealing of Rochelle McGee tombstone and things, and then it really got home. So they had some Panthers there, no elders, whatnot, and it just like we so stuck on that legacy. And I get it, like that's the only thing that we have, because in terms of authenticity of that vibrant, I mean, like, so to walking towards the grave site, they had elder brothers and sisters had the Panther logo. I'm like, we do have younger organizations, but are they known? Have they represent credibility? So think about that.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Before we forget, I want to welcome everybody to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, where we bring you Black radical politics, according to CMB's or CMB members' standpoint. And we're here on Black Liberation Media, where you have all these dope shows that can get you the right analysis, which I'm sure all of y'all already have. So please share this link to someone, especially if they are dabbling with abolitionism, or you have a cousin or yourself has ever been incarcerated. I think you should probably share this link, because we have some young people coming on shortly to talk about Beneath the Mountain, anti-prison reader edited by Jennifer Black and Mumia, as a pretext to our event on Morehouse Campus tomorrow at 7. So definitely link in. Yusef, I'm actually curious your thoughts, and Cherie, you can definitely chime in. So even this idea of holding on to the Panthers, and like the Panthers has not been, even though they're interconnected with other movements, like especially as you look at the Black radical tradition that has never stopped. Why do you think folks are so enamored with the Panthers in a way that I feel like is disrespectful in a way, because it's not like they're carrying along the lessons of the Panthers and they're just carrying the aesthetics. But you have the UNIA, you have Black communists, you have RAM, you have SNCC. Again, some of them are interconnected. You have a long list of people and groups that could be learned from. So what do you think it is that make people aesthetically try to cosplay, as I've heard somebody say, Black Panthers?
I definitely think it's an aesthetic thing, and I think what makes it more of an aesthetic thing, I feel like, especially with the rise of like, online and social media dialogue, so much of like people's politics are deeply connected to their lived experience. And I think that on the surface level, what the Panthers represent to them is a level of like Black pride, Black beauty, loving your skin, loving your hair. And I think because we see so much there can be a lot of anti-Blackness on social media and in media in general. And I think since the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think people deeply connect. Like in the past, like I feel like 15 years, there's just been more talks about, anti-Blackness, and especially when it comes to beauty and desirability. And I think because people connect their experience in the world so deeply with that, it's easier to latch on to a Panther aesthetic, because people, get stuck on the fact that, okay, it's Black pride, Black beauty, it's Black people togetherness, and people really on a surface level connect with that. And, the unfortunate part, like I said, is that they won't go deeper than that. But I think, and then the culture also has a lot to do with it. Me being a particular age, it's like I grew up following or looking at stuff like Destiny's Child, watching Beyonce's career and all these different things unfold. And so I definitely think when you then look at kind of how she had her shift into, putting on the Panther aesthetic and, her Mama Africa stuff and everything, I think people get really into that, because I think, for so long in the media, and there's a surface level of just trying to blend in and assimilate. So people look to as people that didn't assimilate become the Black Panthers. And then the whole politic just becomes about not assimilating and a whole look thing, as opposed to like what their actual politics are. And I think it's very interesting how people very much latch on to the Panther aesthetic, but then the people that are popular, even the people that are just popular online, that have not necessarily, I can't say completely Panther politics, but would lean further left in a sense, like they're more heavily critiqued or looked at as like the crazy people or the wild people and whatnot. But and that's the same thing where people are like, we lost Assad, and everybody's like, Assad taught me. But it's like, if Assad Shakur was alive and had like a social media right now, y'all be blaming her for Kamala not winning, and there would be like an outrage like that. So it's just very much weird how people will praise the Black Panthers and then still put Michelle and Barack Obama on that same pedestal, because they also symbolize like this Black beauty and Black love and Black togetherness. So I just think that I think that's really interesting, and I'm just looking at it on a wide scale. But then I think movement wise, as far as people that are actually organizing, I think it is important for us to look back. And I think if I was not in an organization, I would not be looking at the Panthers from a, what can I learn from, or how can I look at the work I'm doing and compare it to like similar things that, people before have written about and spoken about. But I just think if you're not on the ground in that way, then it is going to be an aesthetic thing.
Yusef, what you think is the driving factor?
I think it's a combination of multitude. When we look at the COINTELPRO, which it get brought up a lot of time, I think probably out of all the Black organizations, the Panthers may have suffered the most at the hands of COINTELPRO, political prisoners, prisoners of war, and then also, in our minds, we consider the Black Panther Party, or the Black Panther Party gave birth to the Black Liberation Army. As a result of the split, we connect those two together not acknowledging there was always been some form of a Black Liberation Army, was just never named. I think again, Cherie pointed the aesthetics, Daruba, Sekou, the names, Bunchy Carter, Fred Hampton, these, Huey Newton, these larger in life individuals, the way they dress, even Elger Cleaver, Papa Rage, the books. There's probably more books that's been produced out of the Panthers history than any other organization history. And I think we just stopped there, and we're not even necessarily reading the books. To Cherie's point, like even when folks saying Astada taught us, it excluded Sundiata Acoli. It excluded Zad Shakur, who was murdered at that fatal day of them being arrested. Pulled over. Sundiata Acoli was arrested later, served close to 40 plus years in incarceration. So we're looking at it from a very, very narrow view. I think it's just the nostalgia of it. And also, as Hiram referred multiple times, it's the laziness of us. And I'm very careful of how I use that word, but particular, like we just get to the Panthers and nowhere else. And we don't want to challenge ourselves. And then also a lot of them are still alive. We're just, it's kind of like, sitting at the feet of your grandpa, your grandmother, your great uncle, and you just love the stories. You're vicariously living through them and not realizing the struggle never stopped. But we have not dared to look to define what the struggle would look like through our lens and through our time frame. We're still trying to go back, because again, I think we always say, like shit, we was born in 60, or we was of age in 65, and with our conscience, like, yeah, I would join the Panthers. I probably, out of all other groups, that's what we think. So we're trying to go back in history and join the past versus building in the future.
Yeah, I'm always curious if they were able to, I don't know if it's possible, if folks were able to highlight the organizations today that are comparable to the organizations back then. So even as I told you, like when we read Hubert Harrison's book, and in the 1920s, I'm trying to figure out like who would be the UNIA of today. Like who would be that organization that has chapters and big and a particular type of thing. And I just, like, I'm always curious about that. And then I wonder if those organizations who are very similar to these folks, like, because even with the Panthers, like we always keep talking about the Black Panthers, and nobody say Black Panther Party in a way that they actually organize in a party formation. So it's like always, so yeah, that's kind of what I'm always curious about. But yeah, any other thoughts? I know we have our guests in backstage, and so in a couple minutes we'll transition to them. But any other thoughts around what was shared or said?
Yeah, I think that party part is really big, and I think the media definitely contributes a lot, because they don't really make stuff that really talks about the party. A lot of it is this particular person, so then it gets back into like, we need a hero, we need a leader, and it doesn't get into like, this is a whole party, this is like, it doesn't get to that part, that it doesn't take like this special supreme being, it's like. And I think that's another thing when you have like movies made like Judas and the Black Messiah and stuff, it's like it'll focus on one particular person, which is great to, learn. And obviously you would need to do more than look at that movie, but it's good to learn about these people and their politics. But I think the way the media promotes it makes it very much a singular man's thing, as opposed to like people looking at it organization wise. So I just think that that's another way why people kind of get caught up.
Yusef, you ever think about writing, contributing? I know you probably did in some of your work, of why we can't bring the Panthers in the 21st century, why we shouldn't bring them in the 21st century. I know you also talked about it a little bit, but you ever thought about formalizing something to create that struggle?
Great question. It's something I've been been meaning to write for shit over 15 years. I've written a little bit here and there. Actually, I'm doing a reflection on my time in New Orleans. So like Rochelle, where he was buried, is like an hour and a half outside of New Orleans in this small white town. So there's a section in this. I just started my Substack thing, and like I want to talk. I want to entertain this. Like, why do we feel the need to? We got people almost 80 years old out there carrying the flag as if they was 20 years old, and I get it why they doing it, but we have not transitioned to something new. And I like, not to say there's not nothing new, but then what have we done to capture the imagination of our generation to push us forward, to be a party, to be an organization, to be a movement? Like it just the nostalgia is sweet and corny at the same time.
So look, y'all, we're gonna take a quick break and bring up our guests, and we'll be right back. So stay tuned.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He thinking buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
Welcome back. Dare to struggle, dare to win. We have one of our guests. I think Lonnie is coming up soon. I want to say peace to Gabrielle, and maybe just tell us, well, we know who you are, but tell us who you are, what school you're at, year, and then any organizations that you affiliate with.
Peace, everyone. My name is Gabrielle Cassell. I'm currently a junior at Spelman College studying comparative women's studies and African diaspora studies. I'm not part of any formal organizations at the moment, but at Spelman, I started the Transnational Black Feminist Collective, and I've done collaborations with a lot of local, radical and revolutionary Black organizations. And so I'm very grateful to be here today.
Absolutely. So, Gabrielle, before we start, and even giving Lonnie a little bit of time to come on, thinking of the conversation we was having, I remember, as early today, but when I'm canvassing on the campus, so particularly for this event that we have coming up, nobody knows. Well, majority of people don't know who Mumia is, right? Even the professors. Like one of the professors, I remember, I asked, "Well, do you know what the movement is?" He's like, "Oh, I remember that." So that's a question of how often in a day-to-day within the last 3 years have you heard people talk about Black Panthers? I know SNCC came on campus a couple times, but is that even a thought? When you think about old radical organizations, do they come up or anything like that?
For me, very rarely, to be honest. I think we will mention them. I think specifically we'll mention the Black Panthers just because of how iconic they are once in a while, but it's never really in the context of really properly engaging with their work. The main place where I've come across it is in a class I took called Women in Social Resistance Movements. And we read a book by Dr. Ashley Farmer called Remaking Black Power, how Black women transformed an era. And so we had a great, but that's probably the class where we've had the most discussion about the Panthers or Black radical organizations in the past. Everything I've learned has been through my own political study. But it's definitely not something that we talk about too much in terms of our curriculum on campus, at least at Spelman.
Yes. Okay, great. So I want to welcome our other panel. Can I call you Lonnie or do I call you Think Piece?
Either or, it really don't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want you to introduce yourself, the year you are at your school, the school, and then any organization you associate with as we get started.
My name is Lonnie White. I go by Think Peace Tribe online, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, etc. I'm a senior sociology major at Morehouse College, class of 2026. Spelman, Georgia, born and raised. And the organization I represent currently as a student, I would say, is the Andrew Young Center Higher Education and Prisons Program, where we go into prisons in the Metro Atlanta area or the Atlanta area, like FCI Atlanta or Metro Reentry, to teach Black male incarcerated students.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we have an event coming up where these two beautiful humans will be engaged in dialogue with us, as Jennifer Black will be in town, and some other folks in the AUC will be engaged in this conversation. And we'll be talking about Beneath the Mountain, an anti-prison reader. And so we just want to kind of have a conversation around some things that we looked at beforehand, and we will give y'all a taste of what you can get tomorrow. So make sure you come out. And a couple of the articles or the written material we want to focus on is Nat Turner, George Jackson, and who is the last one?
It was like MLK, because that's for the event, but
Kevin Rashid. I'm sorry.
Kevin Rashid. Yeah.
So let's start with Nat Turner, and either one of y'all can reflect on some thoughts from the writing. So Nat Turner was interviewed by his lawyer right before they murdered him for getting those buckers up out of there. He was alive from 1800 to 1831. So yeah, some initial reflection from what you read here, and then Yusef and Cherie, you can jump in and contribute to the dialogue. But go ahead.
I think that this was the first time that I really interacted with any material on Nat Turner beyond the basic information I knew about the revolt he led. And so it was specifically the way that, I'm not saying that he didn't actually believe that he was hearing from God, but I think the way that he used that as I guess sometimes as a strategic and rhetorical device for why the revolt had to happen, because it's at the end of the day, the final message was, you have to go kill these white folks. You gotta kill the masters. And so I think his story is very powerful. And I understand why it's so impactful to us, particularly when we're thinking about the place of armed resistance and the counter violence in revolution. And at a certain point, it is necessary, and you can't people have to be willing to put their lives on the line for that. But I think definitely the religious the way that religion contoured the whole thing was very, and spirituality in general was very interesting. Particularly even though he's using mostly Christianity, but you're also seeing some elements of African spirituality in there. So those were some of my initial thoughts.
Go ahead, Lonnie. You want to share some thoughts?
Yeah, specifically towards the spirituality side that Nat Turner discussed with his grandmother, his father, and his mother. It's almost as if he's not listening to God, but he is God. Does that make any sense at all? He's being driven by his ancestors and his community to commit not to commit, but to achieve freedom, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of conversation online recently about our ancestors and our community being our God rather than the standard God that exists in the Bible, King James, etc. And reading this was really interesting because it kind of fueled that argument. It kind of proved that our ancestors and our community is our God, right? Mm-hmm. It's blonde hair, blue-eyed white man from the Middle East. The only blonde hair, blue-eyed white man from the Middle East is not our God. And I'm not religious myself. I'm an atheist, but I do believe that there was something powerful that came from his family, his community, that led him to commit those actions rather than any God per se.
Yeah. Thank you. Yusef, Cherie, you want to add in any thoughts?
And I think I might have seen you before on TikTok before, Think Piece. I think I'm like, I feel like I've seen them on TikTok before.
Everybody be saying that. Yeah.
I feel like, yeah. But yeah, I know that there is this conversation. I've been taking a break for the past week, but I feel like before I took my exit, there was this conversation that I think Deontay Kyle kind of put out into the TikTok ethers and whatnot about we need to put Jesus to the side or put religion to the side. And a lot of people kind of got like this big outrage. And I think recently he connected with another brother that's really popular online that does a lot of liberation theology talks and whatnot. And so I guess I'm just curious, in this era of white Christian nationalism, but then a lot of people still identifying as Christian, but then a lot of other people being like, I'm into African spirituality now, but still not necessarily using that or hoodoo, for the sake of revolution, but more so their own, personal spiritual elevation. I'm just curious, like, with this conversation and, reading the context about Nat Turner, like, what does it bring up for you? Especially, I know you were saying that you're like atheist or whatever. And I feel like I guess I'm curious because I've heard a lot of different radical people speak on, well, yeah, we should just let it go because it's getting in the way and it's brainwashing us all. But then also I'm seeing, once I became an organizer, I started to see how, it is kind of an important thing when it comes to meeting people where they're at, and it can, help people be disciplined and like believing in something greater. What you do need, when it comes to revolution is like this imagination or this spirit that allows you to dream. And I guess I'm just curious, like, with reading this text and thinking about Nat Turner, like, how do you look at spirituality when it comes to organizing and faith in organizing? I'm always curious. And either one of you guys can kind of.
And I know we'll let Yusef go.
Sorry, my bad.
I do want to make it like a discussion, but Yusef and then anybody else can chime
in. I think it's too easy to trivialize Nat Turner as a Christian per se, the religious component. I think we first have to start that we're talking about an oppressed community, oppressed person, oppressed human being, and that the visions that he was seeing, white, black spirits. I think that's African. That's African traditions. So we see the African influence of him, accepting Christianity, using that parenthesis, and making it work towards liberation. And I think because of how we internalize religion in this country, which rightfully so, as oppressive religion, we fail to see the politicalness of it. So I think, that Turner actually educated us on how spirituality is political. Repeat, how spirituality is political. And now, not only Nat Turner, I mean, you go back and read David Walker's Appeal, which came out long before Nat Turner. You go back to Gabrielle Prosser, Demar Vesey, and so many others. Like, they all embody that. And I think we tend to underestimate oppressed people, and one that we'll never be who we originally was. So this is the evolution of who we are. And some of them are just reading recently a book talking about the influence of Black folks in relationship to the Baptist Church, and how we took the Baptist Church and we made it work for us. And then and we tend to neglect, like, Christianity exists in Africa long before Europeans ever thought what that was. So we've always had a tie to it, but because we look at it through the European lens, we tend to forget the African connection, and Nat Turner reminded of that.
Yeah, and I'll let anybody respond to Cherie's question in a second. I think what I saw, as I remember, folks used to say, like, preachers in those days were like the buffer class or the middle class, and as it started out, Mumia or Jennifer, whoever edited the introduction, said that he traded in his currency, the currency of that era, right? And so and I see it as like him committing not only class suicide, but then on the way to slicing the buckras, he had class analysis because they said he didn't kill the poor white people and the white people who didn't own people. And so I thought that was a pretty interesting phenomenon. And then, as you all said, like there was this community that was guiding him since he was little to be what his ancestors, as Lonnie was saying, called him to be, right? Including white people. Like even white people was like, yo, you too smart to be, fit for a slave or whatever. So I thought that was interesting. And then again, maybe to like throw a fire into Cherie's question, like, because he's like the minority of a preacher, as Kobe Cambone always says, like, you don't remember Nat Turner because he's a preacher. You remember him because he killed Europeans, right? He just so happened to be a preacher. But whatever he believed, whatever he was driven to do, whether we believe in spirituality or not, that person's interaction in the world has us still talking about him 225 years later. So obviously the damn dude keep living. So yeah, I'm just curious if, y'all want to kind of like chew on Cherie's question in terms of religion. And like keep in mind, I've been reading Fidel and Religion, and I think a lot of people who are weird about revolution and religion, they should probably read Fidel and Religion. But yeah, anybody want to talk more about Cherie's question?
Yeah, I think talking about like the role of spirituality and like movement and revolution is something that a topic I've been engaging with a lot more recently, particularly with folks like Jaleesa from the Decolonial Feminist Collective. I think people conflate like the institution of religion with spirituality and having a relationship with spirit. And I think, when you look throughout like African diasporic history, and you see how we have used spirituality and even religion for liberatory purposes, like, the fact that the Haitian Revolution began with a Vodun ritual. So I think once we're able to like separate those two things, I think like the conversations will start to make a lot more sense. I think particularly in like the case of Nat Turner, I mean, like, we understand that in this instance, Black people were forced into Christianity, but they were able to still like extract something from it that they found useful to themselves. So even like how he, if you're saying that God led you to do this, then God has to be on your side. And so I think it's a lot more complicated than people like to make the discussion out to be. But I think regardless, like spirituality, whatever that looks like for folks, has to have some part to play in revolution. Like it doesn't have to be tied to religion as an institution, but there has to be something motivating you beyond just beyond like your physical faculties to do the work of revolution. So those have been my thoughts.
Anybody else?
Because you did bring up the Haitian Revolution, I was gonna use that, but I'd say that because I call myself an atheist, that isn't like applicable to everybody, and I know that, especially when you're organizing, like you're often collaborating with the church, especially with food banks, especially like in town collaborative food banks is when I work with. What I'm trying to say here. I think if you use God as a vehicle to achieve the liberation of everybody in the African diaspora, then go for it. Like I don't totally disregard Christianity because of, I don't totally disregard spirituality or religion because of the examples of the Haitian Revolution, because of, frankly, right now how we're seeing like Palestinians survive, but not based on just like the what'd you say, Gabby? You said like physical
faculties, like
right. They're they're also using religion to literally survive genocidal, apartheid, Jim Crow conditions, right? So it's not something that should be discounted completely, and it's not even something that I discount completely. For full context, I was I was in a Christian church, in a Baptist church, for like 14, 15 years. My whole family is Southern Baptist down. Like it's not something that I even disregard in regard to my family. It's something I always put in the context of like, okay, this religion thing, this spirituality thing does have merit to it. Like we can empirically see that. Haiti was the first free black state, and they did that off of they started it from a voodoo ritual. Like this is something that does have merit. And even when you look at like Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, like him arguing that you need to use the church as an institution for liberation, yeah, absolutely. Like I feel like the only issue is the church as an institution. Sometimes spirituality as an institution doesn't take the charge per se, right? Like I don't want to spoil what I'm going to talk about in the event, but you saw that a lot with MLK when he first came to Birmingham. He ran into a lot of strife with the Southern Leadership Conference and how they were trying to achieve their goals. They were trying to negotiate. He was trying to engage in direct action, and there was always conflict between that. And even that, like that example, shows how sometimes the church as an institution can be a hindrance to liberation, but then sometimes it won't, and it can't be a hindrance.
So we ain't trying to get you kicked out of school, but because you said something about Andrew Young earlier, the type of shit that Andrew Young did on Breakfast Club the other day when he talked about how soft and non-confrontational King was, and he
I don't
was
even watch that. I don't even watch the Breakfast Club.
But anyway, no. So I want to go to George Jackson, unless anybody has a last comment on Nat Turner. Yeah, so let's kind of pivot to George Jackson. Yusef was earlier talking about like the notable Black Panthers, and even George is probably not as notable in the mainstream of Panthers, but definitely in the people who know other Black Panthers. So, what's some things that stuck out to stuck out to y'all with this one? George was born in 1941 and was murdered by those folks in 1971. So what's some stuff stick out in the letters that they compile of George writing to his peoples?
I think this was like very interesting. This is like the most I've interacted with George Jackson's work. Like I heard of like his work on the Blood in My Eye and the Soledad Brothers, but I haven't gotten a chance to like read them in full yet. But yeah, the letters to his parents were like very interesting because of the way like he was talking. It was both personal and political simultaneously. And specifically, I think like the frustration that he was espousing to like his mom about, and both of his parents about, I guess, like how he felt that they were stagnant in like their own politics and of their analysis of how the world worked. And like particularly like when we were just talking about religion and how he felt like religion was stifling them from understanding the conditions that they were living in. And it was like at certain points, especially to his mom, I was like, whoa, he's talking to his mom a little crazy right now. But I think I understand, specifically the fact that he was a political prisoner at that point in time. Like, I understand like the frustration that he was experiencing, which I think is normal for people who have a radical or like revolutionary consciousness where you're unable, it feels like even the folks that are closest to you just can't understand where your head is at in terms of, and specifically like the place that he's in, being in the prison and the vantage point that you get as you're like literally in the belly of the beast. Like folks from the outside just can't understand what that's like. And so I think what I thought was most interesting, like even besides like his political analysis, was just the feeling like his emotions coming through the letters, like about how like frustrated that he was, not even necessarily about even his own condition, but just like about the Black condition in general, and how it just felt like no matter, like, people just weren't getting it. And like even being a student in the AUC has like felt that way at a lot of different points, where it feels like folks just don't, like, they know things are bad, but they just, and they have a reason, they know to some extent why they are, but they just remain apathetic to the truth. So I can resonate with his feelings in that sense.
Lonnie, go ahead.
I'm actually familiar with George Jackson's work, specifically Revolutionary Suicide. I skimmed that when I
Huey.
went
Sorry, that's Huey Newton, brother.
Huey.
That's the wrong person.
Yeah.
No, it's actually Blood in My Eye. No, it is Blood in My Eye. I read Blood in My Eye. That's the wrong book. Sorry. But yeah, I think his letters to his parents were definitely they were very charged. He was definitely talking to his mother like wild, but it was because of the situation that he was in. But then you start to see, especially when I read the toward the United Front, like there's this one statement here. He says he will be better equipped to wage the real struggle, the permanent struggle after the revolution, the one for new relationships between men. I like how when he's in the prison system, he starts to recognize like the revolutionary potential inside the prisons, which is something that I've seen so many times. I've had personally so many discussions about Pan-Africanism and that discipline with the incarcerated students that I have ever had at Morehouse or at Boys University, right? So what he's talking about here, and this is, I forgot what specific date and time he wrote this, but if this is like 60s, 70s, we can see that this still continues to trend to this day. And I think of the words of Kwame Ture when I hear like United Front a lot in regards to standing behind political prisoners and standing behind Black incarcerated people as they struggle through the prison system.
Yusef or Cherie? Thanks for that.
So if you'd asked me 30 years ago, which was my favorite book between Blood in My Eye and Solid Brother, I would say Blood in My Eye. You ask me today, I'm gonna say Solid Brother. And I'm gonna kind of jump ahead a little bit to the next person that we get to, Kevin Rashid. I respect Kevin Rashid. When I read the book, it felt like it was some missing pieces to the book of how did he become political. So I was like, he gets incarcerated, then he becomes this political person. And Solid Brother, you're introduced how George becomes political. You're introduced through the narrative, through that pain. And I think that personal side was so sharp. It's so the vulnerability. Like there's the part in one of the letters, he's like, I may not make it home. Like it invites you into that reality. And there's nothing tough about what he said. Like I mean, you can hear the little boy or the young man that wants to be hugged by his mother, that wants to be with his family, that elevates the politicalness that George becomes. Have fortunate enough to meet folks who was part of the San Quentin Six. I was just with Sidney out of Tate, one of the last living person of that, and just like when they talk about George, they talk about the tenderness of George, the softness of George. When we think about George because of Blood in My Eye, we think about this guerrilla, this revolutionary, and he was all those things, but he also he was so much more. And I think that's the missing piece, because not only are prisoners who are inside of prisons, we all are in prison in America. That's that quote that Malcolm has so very popular. Don't look at me crazy because I say I was in prison. You just don't realize that you are in prison now. And that was the beauty of George connecting with Angela connecting with George, and them bridging the gap from the inside to the outside, tying that together. This is what allows Angela, because again, Angela's being attacked for being a communist professor, This is, I think, one of Huey P. Newton's most influential people in his life was George. Was George? I mean, he literally cried. You know, you go and you read that the prologue in Blood in My Eye. So I think George opens up, like he's the, like, we don't know that part about Malcolm when Malcolm's in prison. You know, there's some of it in the book, but it's not to the death. And then also we have to keep in mind there is no place like California prison system besides probably in the South, and the level of torture, the level of repression that they was enduring. This is what gave birth to a George Jackson.
Cherie, you want to add anything about the George Jackson letters?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to add on, it is, I'm thinking about, you know, how you guys were talking about, you know, being on a campus and people not knowing about who Mumia is, and just like that overall environment and mindset, I guess, being on like an HBCU campus versus being incarcerated. And yeah, it's just very, I guess, interesting, like how, to me, like George was able to get so much clarity and be so particular with his imagination, because, you know, he kind of was, you know, had that world stripped around him. But in the same, I think in the same place, it's just interesting when it comes to people that are, you know, on the outside and have quote unquote privileges of the empire and whatnot, and how it's just harder sometimes for, I guess, for some people, you know, not for all, but it just seems like they just have to, I don't know, they're just in an environment where it's just very hard. Even if they may have grown up a particular way, it still is like getting to that HBCU or getting to that campus or whatever is the liberation, in a sense, in their mind. And then, you know, yeah. And then like what versus when you're incarcerated or whatever, like, yeah, it's just interesting where you can be in school and reading about certain people like them, but still not get to that point, or still only engage with them on a surface level. But like once you're completely stripped from that, I don't know, I just always think more about like that duality, and like it's just, and then even I like how Yusef brought up how he was able to connect with somebody that's like, you know, on a campus as a professor, but someone was still able to kind of see past the privileges around her, and think about, you know, somebody who's in a particular situation, and connect, and more so be like, well, how can I help? How can I align? Because I think even now there still is a struggle on how we view prisoners overall. And even the concept of a political prisoner. I think going back to the conversation we were having earlier, a lot of people will be like, oh, I love Black Panther this, Black Panther that, love the aesthetic. But you ask them what a political prisoner is, or you bring up Black August, and it's like, huh? You know? And it still is almost hard for them to even talk about that concept, you know? Like, what do you mean celebrating somebody? Well, not celebrating, but like, what do you mean paying, like, you know, honoring those that are political prisoners in that struggle? Like, what do you mean studying people who are in prison? It's like that, like, you know, so that's, you know, just interesting to me, you know. Those are just my comments.
Yeah, I think a couple things. First, I wasn't hearing the connection between the prison and the university. Then I immediately think about, like, when you said they, like, folks in the universities are in this container reading books, but it almost is likened to like what happened at the George Jackson, because George Jackson books that he had were totally different than the books that most prisoners have now, because they don't get those type of books. And then when you go to the college campus, it's the same type of thing. Like, you're not going to get the myth of propaganda, Black power at the or even the, you know, Black bourgeoisie, which made me think on page 210 when George was talking about how folks he didn't use the word of make believe, the world of make believe, but he pretty much is saying like they're not living in reality, including as he talked to his parents, because like he has time to sit down and read and digest all of these things. And I'm actually curious if I can't remember the list, and Yusef, you might remember what was all on his book list in his cell. But E. Franklin Frazier wrote The Black Bourgeoisie, and that was published in 57. This writing was in that letter was in 65. So it's a good chance that he could have read the Black Bourgeoisie, where E. Franklin Fisher said at that point, Black folks was engaged in the world of make-believe. Like they had Black businesses and all these other things. And I think for his economic analysis to be so sharp, I thought that was a beautiful thing. But as Gabrielle was saying, like, it took a point where he was parenting his mother. Like he was like telling her to sit down and stay focused and like don't react on emotion, but listen to what I'm saying and really think on these things. And I think that was pretty phenomenal. So yeah. Any other thoughts on the George Jackson piece before we wrap up with Kevin Rashid?
I think that oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, thank you. We can't talk about George like without talking about transforming the Black criminal mentality. Like Malcolm exemplified that, but George named that. And by him naming that, George says, I met Mao, I met Fanon. And these folks helped redeem me. And so he just wasn't a regular prisoner. This is how he becomes politicized, what makes him a political prisoner.
And I think, this reminds me of like this like clip I saw of Dr. Joy James talking about George Jackson and Angela Davis, and how when she was like, I can't remember exactly what she was saying, but it was something about how like when she disassociated from George Jackson and then was acquitted, like how that showed like a point of departure in their politics from one another. Not that Angela Davis, I think not to like discount her revolutionary work, but it's like we can kind of see how she was kind of like able to incorporate herself back into the institution, of academia and like the mainstream in general, while that was not possible for George Jackson in that case. And there's like many reasons for that, but that was just something that I found particularly interesting about someone who's not able to be made palatable. And so thinking about like what that means today when we have a lot of like social media, like revolutionaries, like people who, propose like a revolutionary politic or a revolutionary aesthetic, but are actually not doing the actual work of revolution.
It's also good to note when George James was talking about, and I think she explicitly said this in contextualizing Angela Davis, but Angela Davis had white communists who took care of her during, before, after, and probably still to this day. And they have a particular class which Hubert Harrison could express even more clearly, where George didn't have that before jail, during jail, and then afterwards. So I think that was interesting too. Any other thoughts on George before we go to finish up with Kevin Rashid? Okay, so Kevin Rashid Johnson, actually, George was murdered in 71, so that means Kevin was born in 71. That's interesting. Yeah, so Kevin Rashid Johnson, born in 71, so the year that George Jackson was murdered. Still alive, still struggling against the state. What were some reflections that y'all have from this short passage? I think his was probably relatively short.
I think it's interesting that the thesis for his argument is really in that Village Voice interview where Malcolm says, you have to wake the people up first, but not to their exploitation, to their humanity and their own worth, especially because at this time, like it's 1965, the Black body and the Black mind is being put under extreme subjugation. And I thought it's very interesting what he is talking about here is like a precursor to Kwame Ture, Charles Hamilton's like Black Power politics. It's a precursor to like the Black Power movement in viewing like Black power as something with merit, as something that can liberate not only the Black mind, the Black body, and it can also wake people up to the exploitation they experience specifically as Black people. I think how he talks about using like liberatory language is pretty powerful, and it does exist in the context of like Black power politics and the Black power movement, and it kind of does show how relevant it still continues to be, even though many efforts have been made to commodify it and demystify it, essentially. Yeah.
To Lonnie's point, I think the language, the use, in a class called Women's Memoir, we read a piece by Kaguro Macharia, a Kenyan writer, about political vernaculars. And so comrade as a revolutionary political vernacular, I think, was like the thing that stood out most to me here. In that the language that we use to refer to one another like has power. And so he's talking about like the ways that the familiar terms that Black people use to refer to each other, which, like, you know, there's like debate around whether those terms are like empowering or not. But I think particularly if you want to create the environment for revolution, we have to start using specific language. And then I think specifically with what Lonnie was saying about how I think it's also been commodified as well, because you'll see people calling each other comrade, but they don't actually hold any solidarity with each other. Or, you know, like it has to actually be a practice. Like comradeship has to be a practice. Like don't use that term if you're not going to actually engage in the practice that the term requires just because it makes you sound, you know, more revolutionary or whatever. So I think that was like the most critical part of the piece to me. And so I hope that like we can actually hold ourselves to the requirements of what a comrade should look like.
Damn it, Gabby! I was looking for this little drop, and I'm sorry, it's gonna be late, but it's still coming. It's still coming. I gotta find it. Oh, somebody took it off. Where's it go? It's not even gonna hit the same, so I can't do it. But that was it.
Now listen, that's called my boy. You know nothing about that.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yusef, any thoughts on Kevin Rashid's body?
So I'm not necessarily familiar with the particular writings that's being referenced. I mean, I know, and I'm aware of Kevin, and interacted with people who run his Facebook page. I mean, anybody who's in prison, I mean, I've been in prison, so I know what it's like, and to become politically aware. But I think it's important to what does that development looks like, and I think for me that's always question mark with Kevin. I don't know what his development like you say. It goes from prison to that, and then people begin to immediately like he's the next George Jackson, which is unfair to him. He never did it. It's unfair to him. And then also he was one of the founders of the new African Black Panther Party, or whatever they call it, which they ended up splitting, which was a contradiction in itself in terms of ideology. Black and New African, like they crossed each other out. So it's like you're pulling and you're mixing things together. Is he smart as hell? Hell yeah. But in terms of where you're trying to go, it's always been a wonder of mine. And then now that he has health issues, obviously you want to support him. But I mean, I'll leave a guy nameless who's in prison. And he asked me like to write the forward to his book, and I read the book, and I'm like, I mean, because he also asked me because I wrote the forward to Sayyiq Shakur book, like, so he's like, man, you wrote that one, you write this, I'm like, but y'all ain't the same. The books ain't the same. So why would I associate my name because you're just in prison and that you think you got politics, but you really ain't got politics?
Cherie?
I'm just thinking about language and, thinking about, how you were just talking about, how Gabrielle was just talking about the word comrade and what that means. And then I was just thinking, hearing Yusef speaking on, just speaking on language as far as where we're going. And I know that that's something that we always talk about on this channel, as far as like the words that we use, even when it comes to comrade, like that was very true. Because I think when I first joined organization, I was like, well, then obviously everybody in the organization, then that would be a comrade. But I think no, like being an organization, I'm like, it's not that if we're not going to live up to the actual word and have clarity on what that means. Because I probably could go around right now in many orgs and some people probably say, well, comrade is different than friend. No, comrade should be your friend. Or like some people like, well, comrade just means we work together and we do certain things together. And it's like, so then what does comrade mean? That you can hold each other accountable or like, so it's just, we have to seek clarity on that. If we're supposed to be struggling for a better world, we have to have clarity on like what we are and where we're going. And I think that speaks to the larger movement of like, abolitionists. We talk about that a lot of like, what does that mean? We get it means the end of something, but it's just like, there's some people that can say they're abolitionists, but may not identify as socialists, or may not identify as communists. So then what does that mean when it comes to like abolition, like as far as like what does it mean to where we're going? And I think even that I feel like helps the actual movement, because people, I guess the people that, like I said, we're struggling to politicize or organize with, I think that seeks some clarity of like, if y'all don't want a prison system, if y'all want everybody to be free, then like what we need clarity on, like where is that going? And I think that is a part of the obvious work, but I do think there has to be language, or we have to really aim to like develop language on like, okay, if we want something abolished, what are the words we use? Like, and I know there's stuff like transformative justice and other things like that, but I think we have to, as organizers, be really kind of focused on that, piggybacking off of Yusef as far as where we're actually going and whatnot.
So you're watching Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, episode 36. We're here with our incredible guests, Lonnie and Gabrielle, who will be at our event tomorrow evening. And so without sharing any of your lecture or speak or talk tomorrow, please share with the audience who you would be covering tomorrow, who you're talking about, and then why they should probably come out and kick it with us tomorrow.
Tomorrow I'll be talking about Assata Shakur, our revolutionary foremother who transitioned not too long ago. And I think specifically focusing on, because when we talk about political prisoners, we don't often think about women and the gendered experience of prisons and incarceration, and particularly what it means to be a political prisoner and a woman. So I'm excited to be in dialogue about the experience that she shared and what that means for the movement for abolition and to free political prisoners looks like today.
Lonnie?
I'm going to be reading Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from Birmingham City Jail. And I guess in particular, we'll be discussing the problem with the white moderate and using contemporary examples to show like why this is still an issue. It hasn't gone away since 1963. It's just got highlighted in that passage, but it still continues to be that way.
Absolutely. Listen, well, y'all come on out and kick it with these bright young folks. Very important for the stuff and the work that we're trying to accomplish. And Lonnie and Gabrielle, thank y'all for coming on. And I will see y'all, as we say in Charleston, directly. I can see y'all directly. Meaning I'm going to see y'all later.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, tomorrow.
All right, peace. All right, so let's wrap. Listen, I had Renee in the background just in case, because my battery was dying and it's probably gonna die. What percentage I'm on? I'm on 8%. So any reflections, wrap up, Yusef and Cherie, as we get out of here. And if I do fall off, Renee gonna take y'all home. So thank you too much.
I mean, I'll just real quick want to know, like, we got to be mindful when we say you haven't heard about George Jackson, Martin Luther King, Ella Baker, like none of those names and others are in our school books, are taught in our churches. I mean, all these names that we learn differently, and just about who we are in general. And so to expect, whether high schools, colleges, etc., like that, the anomaly is your professor or your teacher who's willing to bring that type of literature in, and it speaks to the type of oppressive society that we live in. And I mean, a lot of these literature that we're referring to are banned literature. Now, I mean, and this is before this era, up under this administration. So, I mean, and then also we ourselves don't know this. So how can we even teach? I mean, that was the purpose of Miseducation of the Negro by Carl G. Woodson.
Cherie?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is, interesting fact, because you may hear about these people, but it's just, what do you hear? Like, what are you learning about? And I think, if you're hearing about even MLK from Andrew Young, it's like, are you really learning about, him in its entirety? So I think, yeah, it's one of those things where I heard of Assata Shakur, I heard of Ella Baker, I heard of these people before I got an organization, but I didn't really know much about them. And I might have heard about George Jackson before, but it wasn't, like I said, it because it might have been in the context that I was learning about George Jackson. I was learning about, he's the person that put Angela Davis's life on the line. I'm not really learning him in the actual context of like what he stood for. It's like he's the smudge in the Angela Davis story, so it's just very interesting, like I said, systemically how we learn about these people. Yeah, that just made me think of that. What Yusef said is very true. But yeah, I look forward to tomorrow. I didn't get a chance to look too much into the book. I want to look more into it now. Oh Lord, we lost Geechee, I think. But yeah, y'all. I think, is Renee gonna actually come up? I don't know. But yeah, I look forward to tomorrow and getting into this book as well. I don't know what I should do. Are we gonna get Renee to come up, or are we supposed to get people off or exit people out? I don't know. Is Renee there? Yusef.
Oh yeah, that was it. We was just doing our closing. He got them on.
Okay. All right. So should we just hop off? Yeah. Hopefully, I guess. Yeah, Renee will sign us off because I don't, have admin to stuff. But thank you guys for tuning in to Thank you guys for tuning in to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win. We'll be back next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Thank y'all. Peace only if you're willing to fight for it, guys.
Peace.
Okay, how do I get off?